Hi, we're going to work on solving one-variable linear equations. By the time you're finished with this lesson, you will be able to solve linear equations, like the one on the screen, by using the distributive property and combining like terms. And you'll be able to explain how you solved it. Please take notes, and if you need to, pause the recording so that you can write things down more thoroughly. Let's start with a simple example. 3x minus 2 equals 10. Remember, our objective with all of these problems is to get x by itself. And maybe we won't use x, maybe we'll use m or y or a or b, but the idea is the same. So to start this one, we have to isolate x on the left side of the equal sign. So the first thing we're going to do is undo the subtraction, undo the minus 2. And to do that, we do the opposite of minus 2, which is plus 2. And in order to keep things balanced, we have to add 2 to the left side and to the right side. When I do that, the minus 2 and the plus 2 go to 0. And then I simply bring down what I have left. So the 3x comes down, the equal sign comes down, and 10 plus 2 equals 12. The last thing I have to do is undo the multiplication that is between the 3 and the x. And the opposite of multiplication is division. And so I'm going to draw a line under each of those, and I'm going to divide out the 3 so that it goes to 1. 3 over 3 is 1, and we want x to be 1x. 12 divided by 3 is 4, and so x equals 4. Now, if I'm unsure of my answer, I can take that 4, and you can do this with any of these problems, and I can plug it back in for x. 3 times 4 is 12, minus 2 is 10. 10 equals 10, that's a true statement, so I know I've done it right. If you need a review on the distributive property, you might want to pause this slide. If you don't, you can continue on with me. So to use the distributive property, we need to take the 2 and multiply it by the x. We need to take the 2 and multiply it by the negative 1. When we do that, we get 2x minus 2 equals 8. Now we've dealt with the parentheses. We don't need to worry about them anymore. Parentheses mean multiplication between the 2 and the x minus 1, and the distributive property means make sure you take that 2 and multiply it by everything inside. Now we have an equation just like our first example, where we need to do the opposite of minus 2, which is plus 2, and we need to do it on both sides of the equation to keep it balanced. The minus 2 and the plus 2 go to 0, and then we can simply bring down the 2x, the equal sign, and the 10, 8 plus 2 being 10. The last thing we do is undo the multiplication of 2 times x, draw a line, put a 2 under each one, the 2 over 2 goes to 1, which is what we need. That leaves x by itself, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Again, we could plug that 5 back into the original equation for x and make sure that both sides of the equation equal 8. If they do, you're good to go. Now, like terms mean either constants, like 7 and 15. They have no variables. 7 and 15 can be added, subtracted, multiplied, divided. They are not like terms, however, with m terms. The 3m and the 8m are like terms with each other, but the 8m is not a like term with the 7. So we can't combine 8m and 7. What we can do, though, is combine both of the m terms, and we can combine both of the constant terms. Now remember that the 3 and the 8 are called coefficients. The m is called the variable in both of them. All right, so what we do is add the coefficients. 3 plus 8 is 11. Then we add the constants. 7 plus 15 is 22. Now we've got something like our first two equations, where we simply have to undo the multiplication of 11 and m so that m gets by itself. So we divide both sides by 11. 22 divided by 11 is 2. And the 11 over 11 just go to 1. And remember that when we say m, we really mean 1m. There's like an imaginary 1 there. So if you add or subtract m, it's always adding or subtracting 1m. Now we're going to put both of those skills, the distributive property and combining like terms, together. So looking at this somewhat complicated looking equation, first of all, we're going to distribute. We have a couple sets of parentheses, so we need to take the 4 and multiply by the 2x, take the 4, multiply by the 7. Then we can come to the other side. Now remember, this one's going to be negative 4 times x, because there's a minus sign in front of the 4, and negative 4 times positive x. Now on your summary page for this lesson, I'm going to have you explain how you solved an equation like this. I'm going to have you solve it, and I'm going to have you explain it. So I'm going to be putting a little explanation off to the right for each step, and that's the kind of thing I expect to see on your summary page to show that you really know how to do this. Okay, so 4 times 2x is 8. 4 times 7 is 28. And then on the other side, so this is what we just did here, those two. And then negative 4 times x is negative 4x, and negative 4 times positive 1 is negative 4. Now that's a very common mistake that students make, is to not carry that negative that's in front of the 4 over to the 1 as well. So just be real careful if there's a negative sign. Now, those aren't like terms, so I don't really want to have those brackets there. We can't combine 8x and 28. However, 28 and negative 18 are like terms, so I can combine those two. And on the other side, I can combine the 6 and the minus 4, not the negative 4x, though. That has to stay there. Okay, so that's our next step. After we distribute, then we combine like terms. When we take 28 minus 18, we get 10. And when we take 6 minus 4, remember that the negative 4x stays out of that because it's not a like term, we get 2. Now we have an x term and a constant on the left side, and we have a constant and an x term on the right side. So our next step is to get all of the x terms on one side of the equal sign. And it really doesn't matter which side of the equal sign. I always like to make sure that x is going to be positive, just to deal with one less negative number. So I'm going to move the negative 4x to the other side, and the opposite of minus 4 is plus 4. So we're going to add 4x to both sides. And then at the same time, I'm going to move the minus 10 over with the 2 so that those two like terms can be together. So the constants can be together. So plus 10, we'll get rid of the minus 10 there. And then I have to do plus 10 on this side as well. So when I do that, the minus 10 and the plus 10 go to 0. The minus 4x and the plus 4x go to 0. And so what I have now is 12x equals 12. 2 plus 10 is 12. My last step and my last explanation in this one would be to get x by itself. And I do that by undoing the multiplication on the left side. So I'm going to divide both sides by 12. And of course, 12 divided by 12 is just 1. Any number divided by itself is just 1. And so then if I needed to, I could take that 1 and plug it back into every place where there's an x in the original equation. So I would plug it in right there in the 2x and right there in the x plus 1 in order to check it. And if I came out with two numbers that equaled themselves, then I've done it right. So remember I said by the time you're finished with this lesson, you will be able to solve an equation like this one. So let's go ahead and solve it. I also want you to have the explanation off to the right, so I'm just going to say that's our given problem. First thing we need to do, distribute the negative 5 over both of those terms. This one, distribute a positive 5 over both of those terms. And when we do that, we get negative 5. Then we have a minus 5 times a minus 5x. And remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. Then we have 5 times negative 8x, which is negative 40x, right here. And 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So the reason that we did that, or the way that we did that, was to simply distribute. Now we can combine like terms. I have a negative 5 and a negative 10. We'll just put those together. I have a 25x and a minus 40x. And I have a minus 4x and a minus 8x. Those are three groups of like terms. Now I rewrote it. You don't have to do this step, but I rewrote it just so that you could see on the left side the constant terms, the negative 5x, or the negative 5 and the negative 10 together, the 25x and the minus 40x together. And sometimes that makes it easier to see which ones can be combined. But again, if you're good at spotting those and you can make sure that the signs go with the numbers or the terms, then you can skip that step. So remember, minus 5 and minus 10, those have the same sign. So the rule is you add the two numbers and you give the answer the same sign. So negative 5 and negative 10 are negative 15. 25 minus 40 is a minus 15x. And then we can bring down the negative 12x on the right side. Okay, we're just about there. I want to move my x terms to the other side. So I'm going to make them positive by adding the 15x. The opposite of minus 15 is a positive 15. Oops, and then I need an x there as well. Okay, that makes the 15x's on the left side go to 0. Then I have negative 15 equals 3x, because negative 12x plus 15, you subtract the two numbers and give the answer with the highest absolute value, which is 3x. And then hopefully this is starting to look familiar. Get x by itself, divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals -5. Now you're ready to do the practice problems. I would like you to either print out the worksheet and do all the problems by hand on the worksheet, or if you don't want to print them out, you can simply handwrite the problems on a piece of paper and work the problems by hand that way. The key, though, is to use the answer key when you're finished to check your answers. If you get any of them wrong, I would like you to do them again until you find where your mistake was. That will help a lot.